Hello everyone and welcome to the Culture Cast. I'm Chris Stashew and I am not joined again by Eric. He is currently taking in America's favorite pastime, that would be the LA Dodgers, and he is at opening day on this lovely, snowy, in my part of the world, Easter day. However, I am joined by your friend and mine, the man who puts Big Cock into Big Cock Daddy, Mr. Mike White.
They're all gonna laugh at you.
Man, that is the most obnoxious shit I've ever heard in a movie. Oh man, whoever thought that was a good idea to play that like 8 times in one scene, that's just bad. Oh, Lord. But today on the Culture Cast, we are kicking off Brian De Palma Month with a look at 1976's Carrie, a film that's kind of a big deal for several reasons, and it's also kind of surprising I'd never seen it. Like I mentioned, the film was directed by Brian De Palma based on the novel by Stephen King of the same title, and it stars Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and John Travolta in a role that he's billed way too highly for. Let me put it that way.
It's the night of the senior prom. The Bates High School gym is alive with excitement. Everybody is there, even Carrie White. The girl no one likes.
We're all sorry about this incident, Cassie.
It's Carrie!
And everyone makes fun of her.
Free Carrie!
The girl who lives in that creepy house with her crazy mother.
Help the sinning woman see the sin of her days and ways. Show her that if she had remained sinless, the curse of blood would never have come on her.
The girl with the strange power.
If I concentrate hard enough, I can move things.
But tonight, no one will laugh at Carrie.
If you don't have a date to the prom next Friday, would you like to go with me?
She's with the best-looking boy in the senior class.
He's trying to trick me again.
She'll be voted queen of the prom.
You know, I can make sure that you don't hurt Carrie White anymore.
For Carrie, it will be a dream come true. For everyone else, it will be a nightmare. Carrie. A new film by Brian De Palma. Based on the chilling bestseller. Starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and introducing John Travolta in his first motion picture role. If you have a taste for terror, you have a date with Carrie.
So, Mike, what did you think of Carrie? You've seen it before, obviously.
Oh, I've seen this movie so many times. Yeah, absolutely love Carrie. It is one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations.
It's also the first Stephen King adaptation.
That is correct.
Which makes it kind of, like I said, kind of a big deal, right? Because it's not only the first adaptation, it's the first adaptation of his first book.
The book that, he had thrown out and his wife got out of the garbage or something like that? I can't remember the story.
Something to that effect. It's, he had the dedication, I think, at the beginning of the book is like, this is for Tabby who got me into it and then bailed me out of it. So, yeah, something to that effect. Like, and for obvious reasons, I mean, the story of Carrie, it's striking to me that this was written by a man.
Right. Especially when you have, the male characters in here are so minor compared to the female characters, and they're basically just doing the deeds that the female characters tell them to do.
Right. Well, and that for me is why Stephen King is probably one of, if not my current favorite living author. His third acts of his later books really fail to hit the mark. But his early stuff is fantastic. But if you're like me, the thing that keeps me reading Stephen King are his collection of short stories. Because I feel like his collection of short stories are just the best. The best stuff he's ever written are his short stories. Third acts of his movies often are also not great either.
Now, I've only read 2. Well, it depends on what you can consider his short stories, because I love Night Shift. I love, Monkey Shines or Monkey Tales? Yeah. The one with the monkey on the cover. Mm-hmm. I barely remember different seasons, but I love the Bachman books.
Well, and that's the thing is obviously if you know anything about Stephen King, like you mentioned, he wrote under a pseudonym for a while, Richard Bachman, which is where we get the film Running Man from as well. Because Running Man was a Richard Bachman novel that was then turned into an Arnold Schwarzenegger vehicle for great one-liners against the host of Family Feud, whose name always escapes me.
Richard Dawson.
Yeah. So, but that movie is nothing like the book or the short story book.
Correct.
Yeah. But if we're talking about prime Stephen King, first adaptation, Carrie is it. And they've done 3 different versions now of Carrie. They've done this one. They've done a TV version directed by Brian Fuller. And then they did the, 2016 remake.
I think it was 2013. And then there was a musical out there as well. And then there was a fake sequel, Carrie 2, The Rage or something like that.
But it has Amy Irving as Sue Snell in that movie.
Right.
So technically it's canon, which is awful, unfortunately.
Well, hey, we all
make mistakes.
Yeah, Stephen King doesn't like The Shining, so there you go.
Yeah, it's true. The creator hates his creation.
Oh, Jesus. That sounds like an Easter egg to me.
Oh, my God. Oh, fuck. Jesus, Mike. However, though, I really like this movie. And again, like I mentioned, I'd never even seen it before. It was just kind of on the list of movies to eventually watch. And, this month being De Palma Month, I worked on this list with you and Mike Wallace. Not that Mike Wallace, but Mike Wallace of Father Malone and working at Zach Bagan's Haunted Museum fame. He's been on the Culture Cast a couple times, and the Kolchak tapes. So you guys worked with me to create this list of movies because for me, honestly, really the only De Palma films I've seen are Scarface, which most millennials have seen, and then Phantom of the Paradise, which I absolutely love the Phantom of the Paradise.
And this was his fourth thriller. I guess you could call Phantom of the Paradise a thriller because Sisters, Phantom of the Paradise, Obsession, and then this one. In this one, he had been a known quantity before this, but this obviously really put him on the map.
Right.
And oddly, this is the most, he gets a lot of shit for a lot of years about ripping off Alfred Hitchcock. This, to me, is the least Hitchcock of his films. Yeah,
I didn't catch any, Hitchcockian vibes. This movie is it struck me more of, Roman Polanski in a way. Rosemary's Baby type feel to it. It has a lot of gothic horror in it. And obviously, there's not a lot of blood, and there's not a lot of gore in this movie. There's none. So it does a lot with a little, if that makes sense.
The most Hitchcockian thing for me is when they are dancing, she and William Catt are dancing, and the camera's spinning around, and they're spinning around as well. It kind of reminds me of Vertigo.
Yeah.
But there's not, there's no shower scene like we had in Phantom of the Paradise. There's no, there's some voyeurism going on in here, but mostly it's we, the audience, as the voyeurs, especially when we open up in that shower scene, or it's not obviously the opening, but very close to the beginning of the film is this scene in a girl's shower, and it's we're pulling back the curtain and being able to see something that we've never been able to see before as male viewers, and experiencing this slow motion with that amazing score, who's a Pino Donaggio score, just going over and just so loving and everything, and Sissy Spacek soaping her breasts, and it's just so sensual. And then we get the first horror moment of it happening, so we get that great that twist of the knife as we go into that scene, and then that just ends up being terrifying. And especially it's because Carrie has no idea what's happening to her body, and it's supposed to be kind of a normal thing, but the girls just fall upon her like she is just such an outcast, and they're just throwing all those sanitary napkins at her and screaming at her and chanting at her, and it's just such a horrifying scene. It's a really great way to start the movie.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. It's just, when you look at what this movie kind of has to work with, and that's the performance of Sissy Spacek, and I don't think you can watch this movie without knowing where this movie's going at this point in 2018. I mean, everyone subconsciously has seen that image of Sissy Spacek covered in blood.
Right.
So you know where this film is going.
Well, hell, it's on the poster now.
Yeah, right. So it makes it harder to watch. It makes the tension increase because you're like, when is this going to happen?
Right.
How much worse is this going to get before this happens? Because I mean, it hits pretty much it hits a crescendo right as the bucket of blood falls on her head.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just, I mean, from then on, this movie just kind of does a 180 in the best way possible.
Right. One, I love that use of the slow-mo during the prom sequence and De Palma just dragging everything out and just heightening the tension, ratcheting it up, and the use of sound in that scene too, where sometimes we hear the dialogue, sometimes we don't, but again, we get that score going over so much of it. And that to me is the most Bernard Herrmann-esque time that the score gets close to Hitchcock, is just hearing those kind of stabs of the violin, especially when Sue is there and we get the lights moving and she's not really noticing it for a while, and we'll get those little stabs of those violins when the lights move, and it's just like, come on, Sue, pay attention.
The sound design in this film is fantastic. It may be the best thing about this movie from a technical standpoint is the use of sound, because they use it to let the audience know when Carrie is using her powers.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, that is very Hitchcock-esque in a way that's, I mean, is it original? Not really, but at the same time, it works really well in the film, so it doesn't necessarily have to be original.
When you boil down the plot to this, it's so simple. It's like the whole idea of girl tormented at school, you've got the two other girls, Sue and Chris, and them plotting, one kind of trying to help out Carrie, the other one really not trying to help out Carrie, and their machinations. And then you have her teacher as another spoke of this wheel, and you have her mother as the other spoke, and just how all four women kind of act upon Carrie until Carrie finally acts upon the world at the end. And I find it very nice that it isn't until she becomes a woman, when she has her first period, that she gets these powers, that she exhibits these powers, and that she's able to take control of her life in that way. Though the ending is always a little questionable to me. Like, is she being punished by God? Is she punishing herself? Is she being punished by her mother's spirit? Why is this necessarily happening? But
the house sinking into the ground is an act of God.
Is that right? Okay.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just assuming so.
It could be.
It's very symbolic, let's put it that way. I mean, the house being consumed in flames, sinking into the ground. I mean, I don't, any 5-year-old with any basic knowledge of the Bible could be like, oh, it's sinking into hell. But like, how that happens, like you said, is so kind of out of left field, right?
Right. I read the original screenplay for this last night, and it's interesting that there's a whole extra thing that happens before the beginning of this movie. Like, the whole idea of the shower sequence doesn't take place until about 15 pages in. And before that, you get a lot more of Carrie. It's a flashback scene to Carrie seeing her neighbor, and her neighbor is sunbathing, and she goes over and says hello, and she's fascinated. This woman has, as she's sunbathing, she has her breasts are partially exposed, and Carrie's just like, oh, what are those? What's going on over here? And the girl's like, oh, these are my breasts, and she's like, oh, I won't get those. Mama says only bad girls get those, and that's why she has breasts, is because she got those when she was doing the devil's work and having me, and making me. And it's just like, there's this whole thing. And then also we get this thing of like stones raining down on the house when Carrie's mom calls her back in, and they have this kind of, like you're saying, like an act of God happening with all these stones falling on the house. So it kind of tells us that something is going to happen with this house later on in the story. But I think that they were really smart to cut that out, so we didn't have to suffer through this 8-year-old version of Carrie, and that we could just get really right into the shower sequence and set that up right from almost the very beginning.
Well, and that's the thing with the remake of this movie. The remake actually puts some of that on the DVD, some of those things. So the remake of the movie even tried to be more, I guess, faithful to the version of the film that didn't get made originally, because they cut the stuff with the rocks out because it just didn't look good.
Right.
I think it was a budgetary restriction, I'm assuming, or they just couldn't get it to look right. But they actually have that in the remake with the stones hitting the house. So
I did not watch the remake. Is it any good?
I mean, it's diminishing returns. You know the story. The story's not any different. They just kind of add some stuff in, like you were talking about, that you had like kind of heard about in the original that didn't make it in there for obvious reasons, namely technological reasons. And in this movie, they kind of have them in the deleted scenes because they still didn't want to show them, but they're still there if you want to see them. So,
right.
I mean, Julianne Moore is okay. Chloe Moretz, I never really take her seriously.
See, I like Chloe Moretz, and I find her to be very pretty. So I'm not trying to say that Sissy Spacek is ugly, but she has a very unusual look. And I think it sets her apart from the rest of these other girls, because the other girls that are in the original Carrie are very pretty girls.
Right.
And she's already an outsider just by her looks, just by the straight hair, the very pale eyebrows, the lack of makeup, all of these kind of things. She's very much an outsider just from that. Right. And so Chloe Grace Moretz, unless she really, dowdies herself up, but I just don't see her playing Carrie.
She doesn't. So, I said, I can't take her seriously because she just looks like the pretty girl from everything I've ever seen her in. So.
Right. It's one of those things where it's the really beautiful girl who's wearing glasses and everyone thinks she's ugly until she takes her glasses off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sissy Spacek is fantastic in this film, though.
She is fantastic.
She's the best part of this movie from like a film watching standpoint. Her role, I mean, you feel for her character.
Hell yeah. Oh yeah. And Piper Laurie just over the top and really such a great villain.
Torments the shit out of her.
Oh yeah.
Just like absolutely torments the shit out of her.
And thinks she's in the right the whole time.
Right. Which is, again, what makes it so good. Is that she fully buys in. And if, for fans of Twin Peaks, you'll recognize Piper Laurie as Catherine Martell from Twin Peaks. But this film is the reason she ended up being in Twin Peaks, more or less, because this film, revitalized her career. Kind of, brought her back into kind of the mainstream as kind of a mainstream actress.
And there's a reason you mentioned John Travolta being so high up in the credits. There's a reason why he was that high in the credits was because at this point he was Barbarino on Welcome Back, Kotter.
Right. And
he was huge in that role. And this is pre-Grease. This is, I think, one of his first film roles. They say that he's in The Devil's Reign, though I've never actually seen him on screen. But this is one of his earliest roles, and that's one of the reasons why he manages to get so high in the screen credits. And I really like him and the relationship between him and Nancy Allen in this. And I really like the fellatio scene, especially when she keeps saying his name in order to hide that she's giving him head. I was like, okay, what's going on here?
I hate Carrie White. Hello. That must have been the money shot, I guess. I hate Carrie White. I don't know. That was bizarre. But again, those things in this film feel very De Palma. That feels like a very De Palma thing to do. And the framing, right?
The framing is amazing. Yeah. Especially all those diopter shots that he uses. And then the shot of Carrie in front of the window where it's her teacher and the principal talking. I love that shot. That use of the depth of frame.
Yeah. Well, and also the framing of the scene right at the end when she's about to flip off and it's showing kind of her panel moving across the screen and the people laughing. And again, also left up to interpretation at the end of the film. Were they actually laughing at her or not?
Right. And I love that.
And then it makes her less of a sympathetic character in my mind. If you're kind of but are you really being laughed at? Because it seems like a hallucination, right?
Yeah, it does. There are times where it's is this really happening or is this not happening? Especially, PJ Souls laughing, I can see that actually happening, but I think the rest of the people would be like, no, that's really bad. Why are you laughing at this?
And this whole movie is essentially setup. This is an hour and a half. It's probably an hour and 20 of setup. And then the last 10 minutes are the huge payoff of this movie.
Oh, yeah. The catharsis is amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You get her killing everyone at her school, her killing Nancy Allen and John Travolta in a pretty, I would say, pretty boss way of killing them. You know, kind of flipping their car over and blowing them up just to be sure. And then you get her getting her kind of religious revenge on her mother by crucifying her to the wall.
Yeah.
Which, again, fantastic. After her mother stabs her in the back.
And yeah, really stabs her in the back. Literally stabs her in the back.
Yeah.
I love that whole thing with Saint Stephen in the closet, how she praises Saint Stephen. He's got all the arrows. And then when you look at her mother after she's been stabbed with all the kitchen utensils, that she looks just like Saint Stephen.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. Again, De Palma there's a reason that this film is still as well regarded as it is for a Stephen King adaptation. Because it's a film that holds up. I mean, there aren't many horror movies from the 70s that I would be like, this is a film that's kind of like essential watching. If we're talking about like American-made horror film classics from the 70s. Like having watched this just once, I can already appreciate it. I don't have to watch it again to kind of pick up on some more of the techniques that De Palma was using. But everyone in this film is fantastic, and I don't feel like anyone outshines Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie's performances. Because Sissy Spacek is the best, and then Piper Laurie is a close second, because she is on a tear through this entire film.
And those nice low-angle shots of her when she's dressed all in black and just spouting out all that nonsense from not even from the Bible. She says it's from the Bible, but it's like, yeah, that's not in there. You know, like the whole thing about the blood and all that. It's like, yeah, you're just making all this shit up, lady.
This is just some self-published Bible bullshit that they're trying to pass off as real. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, let's take a break, and when we get back, we'll finish up talking about the film. Who is Carl Kolchak?
He's a reporter.
Now that is news, Vincenzo. News! And we are a newspaper. We are supposed to print news, not suppress it.
With the INS.
What's an INS?
Independent news service, sir. Founded in 1904 by Enrico Paluzzi.
Who seems to have a nose for the strange and unusual.
Well, last year in Las Vegas, I uncovered a series of murders that turned out to have been committed by a vampire.
And what is the Kolchak Tapes?
It's a podcast.
All about Carl Kolchak.
What's a Kolchak?
The Night Stalker.
And where can you get it?
On iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.kolchaktapes.com.
As foolish a game as any that Gory the Ghoul could make up.
Movies have become a portal to a vast and growing pop culture universe, but you don't need to go over the rainbow to get your pop culture fix. Just head to Rainbow Comics, Cards, and Collectibles. They are your one-stop shop for comics, toys, posters, games, and more. Not a pop culture nerd? No problem. They have something for everyone, including a wide array of sports cards, collectible card games, even memorabilia. Stop by one of their 2 locations today. The flagship location at 3310 South Minnesota Avenue, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or their newest location at 1501 Pine Lake Road, Suite 17, Lincoln, Nebraska. Most importantly, don't forget to add them on Facebook for pop culture news, weekly live videos, and special events.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
Week after week, I'm mesmerized by the focus given great films and questionable films alike. But every episode is a learning and entertaining experience.
This is hands down the best movie podcast. They cover so many different genres across so many years, from obscure movies to blockbusters.
If there's only one podcast about movies and cinema that you listen to, make it this one.
The Projection Booth Podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
All right, we are back and we are finishing up talking about Carrie. So, for you, Mike, and kind of in De Palma's canon of films, Carrie pretty high on the spectrum, low on the spectrum, middle of the spectrum?
I would say, yeah, it's a very solid film, and I would put it this like mid-high. I mean, the direction, he doesn't over-direct this film. There are times where he gets a little bit up his own ass when it comes to some of the direction. He's doing this stuff for a reason, and the way that he's using the camera is really smart, and it's not necessarily, there are times where the direction calls attention to itself. Some of the things, like I said, like you mentioned the split screen, I mentioned the camera doing the 360s. There are those moments, but then there are other times where you just are so absorbed in the story that he is, handling the camera so well that you don't even really realize what's going on with that and the way that he's affecting you with his direction. So yeah, I would say mid to high with this because it is one that you can go back to over and over again.
Well, and having only seen like a handful of De Palma films, with Phantom of the Paradise still being my absolute favorite, and that they may change by the end of the month, I'm not sure. I would say that this is better than Scarface, but that's not hard. I know that might catch some flack, but I don't think that Scarface is that good of a movie, personally. I think it's okay, but it definitely has some problems, and we're not even talking about it this month. But let's just say Al Pacino's Cuban accent is the most distracting accent you'll ever see in a movie, especially when it's meant to be taken seriously. So I would say Carrie is probably almost as good as Phantom of the Paradise for me. It's a perfectly paced horror movie that does so much with, I would say so little, but that might come off as kind of an insult.
It's not like you're dealing with trillions of dollars worth of budget here. There are a lot of just the idea of coloring the frame red and having the action take place with that, or the use of the slow-mo with the blood and the bucket falling on Billy's head and these kind of things. It's just like William Catt. There are so many like little things that he's doing that really makes a big impact without a ton of money behind it.
Yeah, this film has a budget of $1.8 million, but that's in 1975-76 money, so take that with what you will. So,
and just little things like the slow-mo at the end, and did you notice the car going backwards behind Amy Irving when she's walking up towards the house?
Well, because it was filmed in reverse, right?
Right, yeah. So it's a nice effect that he's just like, let's make this more dreamlike and have you walk backwards and we'll play it forwards. It's like, okay, yeah, that's nice little trick that you're doing that, again, kind of just adds to the surreality of the situation.
It's a great use of reverse motion because you want to kind of subtly clue the audience in that it's a dream sequence, but not completely give it away.
Right.
And so as opposed to like really giving it away, you just kind of hint at it, and then you catch him with the Sissy Spacek arm popping out of the grave.
Which still makes me jump today.
It's kind of cheap, but in the best way possible.
Yes.
Unlike Friday the 13th, it's cheap in a good way. And because Friday the 13th is just cheap for cheap's sake. So, well, what would you give the film out of 5, Mike?
I'd give this 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm with you. 4 out of 5 for me as well. I think it's a good movie that, is there a remake? Yes. Is the remake worth watching? Compared to this one? No. This one has more of the performances you want to see, and the direction. Obviously, you can't beat De Palma. No offense, you're just not going to be able to for most directors. So, what do you think the film has on Rotten Tomatoes?
I kind of cheated, and this showed up on Plex last night, so I think it's like 93.76 or something like that.
Yeah, that's right, 93%.
Okay.
Carrie is a horrifying look at supernatural powers, high school cruelty, and teen angst, and it brings us one of the most disturbing and memorable prom scenes in history.
Yeah, I know Andrew Saris didn't like this very much, but Pauline Kael always made up for it because she just gushed over whatever the fuck De Palma wanted to do. It could have been like fucking Wise Guys and Bonfire of the Vanities, and she would have been sucking his dick.
Jesus. Oh, man. Well, Mike, what was I going with that? Oh, shit. I don't know where I was going with that. Let's just, hold on. So let's take our final break, and we'll play a preview for next week's show.
My name's Wade Watts. My dad picked that name because it sounded like a superhero's alter ego, like Peter Parker or Bruce Banner. But he died when I was a kid, my mom too. And I ended up here, sitting here in my tiny corner of nowhere. There's nowhere left to go. Nowhere. Except the Oasis. A whole virtual universe. Let me take you on a trip around the world and back. People come to the Oasis for all the things they can do. And you won't have to sit still. But they stay because of all the things they can be.
Can you feel this?
Let me show you the world. Yeah. It's the only place that feels like I mean anything. The Oasis was the brainchild of James Halliday.
Hello. If you're watching this, I'm dead. I created a hidden object, an Easter egg. The first person to find the egg will inherit $500 billion and total control of the oasis itself.
Who is this Parzival, and how the hell is he winning?
Find him.
This isn't just a game. I'm talking about actual life and death stuff.
The oasis.
The world's most important economic resource.
This is nothing less than a war for control of the future.
Welcome to the rebellion, Wade.
Like many of you, I only came here to escape. But I found something much bigger than just myself. Are you willing to fight?
Help us save the oasis.
All right, that's right. On the next Culture Cast, I will be rejoined by Eric, and we will be talking about the second Steven Spielberg film to come out in 1 year, the pop culture...
Confection?
Yeah, whatever the hell you want to call it. The pop culture overload that is Ready Player One. Before we close this out, Mike, you're not going to be joining us on that one, but you saw the movie, so what did you think of Ready Player One?
The term ocular trauma just kept going through my mind while I was watching it, because I was just like, get this out of my eyes. I don't need to see all these CG characters. I wanted more time in the real world. Does that mean I'm an old man? Because I wanted to know, like, how does the economy of this world work? How does this work? How does this thing happen over here? But
no, they definitely downplayed the real world, because in the book, which I read in one day, stupidly, in the book they definitely explain more of the real world.
I would have liked to have known a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and they didn't put it in there.
Yeah, and yeah, just the character designs were very unsettling. It was just like, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. And as I'm watching it, I'm just like, wow, those characters in Avatar sure did look more realistic.
Well, and to defend the film a little bit, they're supposed to be like weird digital characters. So I guess that's a way out in their mind. I don't know.
I suppose so.
Yeah. I mean, trust me, I get it.
You have Steven Spielberg doing this movie. Why does he cut out all the references to his own films?
I think reading an interview with him, something to the effect of like, this is just not something he wanted to do, was like, he felt uncomfortable referencing his own movies.
Okay.
Okay. Sure, because of course you did.
Were there any Star Wars references in this movie?
No, there were a couple, but they weren't like visual. They were more like dialogue references. Like,
right.
Well, I could get you the Millennium Falcon. You have the Millennium Falcon? Yes.
Yeah, I would have thought I would have seen some X-Wings flying into battle or something.
Yeah, well.
Okay.
You and me both. You and me both. Yeah, so you weren't a fan then, is what you're saying.
It wasn't the worst thing that I've seen. Can I be honest and say I like Tomb Raider better?
No, you can be honest.
Okay. Yeah, I like Tomb Raider better. It felt rushed, and it felt like there were things that were cut out that would have made it a better movie, but at the same time it felt like it wore out its welcome pretty early. I
enjoyed it, but that was my first viewing. It may be one of those movies where I come back and watch it again and I'm like, oh, okay. You know, and I'm not sure I need to pick the movie apart to make sure I catch all the references.
No, for God's sakes, no.
Yeah. And for me, the references worked better in the movie than they did in the book, because the book was just too much. It was like every other sentence was like Ernest Cline thinking he was being clever by putting another reference in, so...
Oh, so it could have been a Diablo Cody kind of thing?
Yeah, kind of. It could have, yeah.
Ooh, no.
It also was very un-Spielbergian as a film.
Yeah, I totally agree. It didn't feel... Like, towards the end, when... like one of the characters punches another character in the face, I was just like, okay, this kind of reminds me of like an 80s film. This reminds me of like the end of the Goonies or something. But yeah, it felt like Zemeckis, of all people, who I haven't been a fan of for a lot of years, but it feels like Zemeckis probably should have done this movie, especially since they're making so many Back to the Future references.
The Zemeckis cube.
Yeah.
Great.
And just the music cues, having Evan Silvestri doing the music, and yeah, just so, I mean, wherever he and H would meet up at, not H's warehouse, but there was a big, I can't remember the character's name, but so-and-so for mayor, that was in the first Back to the Future. There are so many Back to the Future references.
The references kind of got a little much, and they weren't done necessarily in a way that I was like, this is good.
Still liked it better than Scott Pilgrim.
Oof, jeez.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, hey, it's your opinion. Scott Pilgrim is, again, similarly diminishing returns. So
yeah.
So, with that in mind, where can people find you, Mr. White?
Well, now that I've just shit all over everybody's favorite movie,
right,
they probably won't want to go over to projection-booth.com and find out more about the Projection Booth podcast, or go over to kolchaktapes.com and listen to the Kolchak tapes.
And as always, you can follow me on Twitter at CultureStash. You can You can follow Mike on Twitter at ProBoothcast, and you can follow Culture Shocked, our parent website, on Twitter at Culture Shocked. Head on over to the website and you can find out more information about today's episode. You can find links over to iTunes where you can rate and review the show, and you can find a link to our Patreon. Give us a couple dollars. We'll make it worth your while. If you like what we're doing, every little bit helps. And as always, big thanks to Eric and Wovoka for allowing us to use their song for the intro, and to my good buddy Justin Scott for allowing us to use his song as the outro. And the biggest thanks of all to you, Mike, for sitting down and talking Carrie.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
Catch you on the next Culture Cast.
You know how we do, I'm just two-step, drink in my right hand, phone in my other hand, getting to the money, oh man, two-step, posted with the crew, yeah, you know how we do.
Hey, two-step, you know what I'm saying, 1, 2, 1, 2, Benjamin, aka the Black T, you know what I'm saying. Catch me with my crew every day.